So in this lesson, you guys are working on continuing to write your different sequences of values depending on the patterns that you see. And the last few days, we've been working on noticing patterns, whether you have a common difference, adding or subtracting a value, or if you have a common multiplier or a ratio that you're multiplying by. And so what we're going to do is practice those with some different scenarios. And remember, we've been writing all the recursive routines starting with a sub 0. So if you were thinking that the first term that you saw in the sequence was a sub 1, your answers might be one term off from what we had here. So let's assume that we're going to start with a sub 0, and we'll go forward. So again, with the recursive routine, you start with a sub 0, enter, answer, and then you're going to put, are you adding or subtracting for a common difference? Are you multiplying by a ratio, a common multiplier? And then the amount is going here. Again, try to enter your results as simplified fractions or ratios, no decimals unless it's absolutely necessary because it's non-terminating, non-repeating. It cannot be written as a fraction or a ratio. If you do run into some really large or small numbers that require scientific notation, remember the calculator shows you scientific notation like this, but mathematically we want to show it either as the multiplier of a 10 with the base or what that number value actually is. The best way that I can provide you feedback is that on ClassKick, not only are you checking your answers, but you are showing me what you are doing to come up with certain prediction results. It's very hard for me to tell, one, if you have a wrong ratio or if maybe you just entered one thing incorrectly in your calculator. So you can either type the additional support work into ClassKick so I can give you feedback, or you have the camera icon there that you can take a picture of what you're doing on paper and insert it, and then I can very quickly tell where the misconception is. So let's take a look at some patterns here. So these are given to you already as the calculator recursive routine. So the 15s here are representing your a sub 0. And so let's look at the first routine. We're taking 15, enter, answer times 1/3, enter, enter, enter over again. So what would that look like? Well, a sub 0 is 15. That means a sub 1, your technically first term, right, would be 5. Then we would have 5/3. Then we would have 5/9. So again, for the type, because we have that common ratio, it would be a geometric sequence. We have that multiplier of 1/3 each time. So again, we're multiplying by fractions. The numerator always gets multiplied by 1. The denominator is getting multiplied by 3. That's why I have the 5/3 that turn into 5/9. The next term in your sequence would be 5/27. So for the 20th term of my sequence, I'm taking 1/3 and multiplying it over and over again 20 times. So this would be my expression, right, to get me to that 20th term. So you could do it in the calculator, just keeping track how many times you're pressing enter, or you could do this instead, and you would end up with, this is a very small number. So you can write it as scientific notation, 4.301957986 times 10 to the -9th, or you could write out its exact value, showing just how close it is to 0 for that 20th term. Now, if you ended up with something with 10 to the -8th power, that's because you assumed that this was a sub 1, and that was your 20th term. All right, so the next one. If we're thinking this is our a sub 0, right? So if you started off with a 15, then if you're adding 3 each time, you would then have 18, 21, and 24. Because I have that common difference of adding 3 each time, it's an arithmetic sequence. So I can either keep track in the calculator of hitting enter 20 times after my 15 to see what that term is, or algebraically, I could write the expression that would represent that term, which would bring me to a value of 75. Now, if you had 72 for your 20th term, that's because you assumed that the 15 was your first term, a sub 1, and that brought you to that value. So we're going to use the idea that based on what we have here for our sequences, we're going to start with a sub 0, okay? You're going to use that to find the pattern, whether it's a common difference, adding or subtracting by a value, or a common ratio that you're multiplying by a certain value to help you come up with the given terms. As you move on to the back, you're going to get into some different scenarios where you might find it helpful to generate different tables of values to help you think about what's happening in the scenario, especially kind of with the bathtub problem where you've got a draining and filling going on at the same time. Also, when you've got some comparisons going on, that might be helpful as well as you're generating that table of values to see what patterns exist. So again, as we're going through, if you have any questions, hit the raise hand icon on ClassKick, type in specifically what you're having difficulty with, show me as much evidence as what you are trying on ClassKick so I can give you that feedback and hopefully clarify any misconceptions that you have.